Okay, good morning. Today teaching will be on Joshua. This is the last of the. I did 3 teachings on people close to David or King David, and then I did 3 teachings on people close to Abraham, and then this year I've been doing 3 teachings on people close to Moses, and it's going to finish with Joshua. So that'll be the covering what we're going to cover today. As I go through this, I know that some people here have read the Bible many, many times and probably forward and backward dozens of times. And some of you maybe are newer and haven't read it maybe at all, or maybe you're a new Christian and haven't read it much. So my point in my teachings, I try to challenge people that even if you read it a lot of times, it'll be something new to learn for people who read it a lot. And for those of you that haven't read it very much, just try to focus, on the main points you see on the screen or that Joseph Lynn reads. Because it's going to be a lot of information, and for those that don't know it as well, it's probably going to be maybe too much information for some of you. But anyways, let me start with prayer. Thank you, God, for this teaching you gave me, and please speak to our hearts and bless this time. And thank you for this church we can be a part of, and this new nice building. And we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so the title up there it is. Joshua, Moses' successor or heir is the title of the message. And a little bit of background on Joshua. I know one of the last songs that the worship team sang was referenced Yeshua. Yeshua is the Hebrew name for Joshua. That also means God is salvation, or Yahweh is salvation. That's what it means in Hebrew. The Greek version, which is what most of the New Testament was written in, was we say Jesus. And Jesus in Greek means God is salvation, same name. So when you talk to Jewish people or Messianic Christians, and they refer to Jesus, they'll often not say Jesus, they'll often say Yeshua or Yehoshua. It's all the same name. Joshua, the son of Nun, was from the tribe of Ephraim. That was one of Joseph's younger son. That's where he came from. And so that's the background on Joshua. So we'll do 10 sets of verses, starting with the first one. Thank you, Joseph Lim, for reading.
Exodus 17, 8-10. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself to the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses told him, and he fought against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Heir went up to the top of the hill. 13-16. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in a book as a memorial, and recite it to Joshua, and I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." And he said, "The Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation."
Said, you're going to be my general, you're going to be my military leader, and go pick an army for yourself. So that was his job. After Israel left Egypt or fled Egypt, they were attacked for no reason. They call it an unprovoked attack or unprovoked war. And this nation of the Amalekites, or Amalek, attacked Israel. So Joshua had to go fight them, and God wasn't too happy with Amalek and said, they're going to be in trouble or have war. Let's go forward in time a little bit. Later on, God called Israel's first king, King Saul, and said, "Go kill all the Amalekites." This is what it goes back to, is because God wanted them eliminated because of what they did to Israel. We know that was one of the times that God gave King Saul, a command saying, kill all of them, kill all their stuff, and don't let anything live. And of course, King Saul did not obey God and left some of them live. Of course, their king Agag lived, and a descendant of Agag was the one that named Haman, who was the one that tried to wipe the Jews out during Esther's time. I did a whole sermon on Esther before. Even after Saul failed to kill the Amalekites, when David, before he became the full king of Israel, he was actually ruling in Ziklag, and there were a bunch of people that came and raided Ziklag and burned the city down. And of course, they came back, and he was weeping and crying, and they were all upset because all their wives and kids were not killed. They were kidnapped and taken away. Well, guess what people was the people that ransacked Ziklag. It was the same people as the Amalekites. They were the ones that attacked Ziklag, and they got their stuff back. But I wonder what David was thinking and saying, hey, those guys that Saul should have taken out, they just came and burned my city down and stole my wife and kid. I wonder if he was thinking, or David was thinking at that time. Anyway, so the Amalekites, does anybody know where they came from? Where they came from, Dad? Esau. Exactly, they came from Esau. They did not come from Canaan, they came from Esau. Esau married, to displease his parents, Esau married a Hittite named Ada, and he had a son named Eliphaz, and Eliphaz had a wife and 6 sons, or actually 5 sons, and then through his concubine, he had a 6th son, and Eliphaz's 6th son was named Amalek, so Amalek was the grandson of, my dad said, Esau. That's where Amalek came from. So Esau married a Hittite, and we're going to see that come into the story of Joshua. Hittite was one of the sons, so Noah had 3 sons. His youngest son was Noah's youngest son was Ham. And Ham's oldest son was Canaan, which is where the Canaanites came from. And one of the Canaanites, or Canaan's sons, was the Hittites, the Amorites. All these people you'll see that Joshua's going to fight, they all came from Canaan, including the Hittite who Esau married. Of course, another famous Hittite is Bathsheba's husband. Uriah was also a Hittite. So a little bit of history on the kind of setting up the story here. And for first mention of Joshua as a general. So now we'll go into number 2. Go ahead.
Exodus 24. 13 and 15. So Moses arose with Joshua his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. But to the elders he said, wait here for us until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Heir are with you. Whoever has a legal matter, let him approach them. Then Moses went up to the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. 32, 16 and 19. The tablets were God's work, and the writing was God's writing engraved on the tablets. Now when Joshua heard the sound of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there is a sound of war in the camp. But he said, it is not the sound of the cry of triumph, nor is it the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear. It came about as soon as Moses came near the camp that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger burned, and he threw the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. 33, 10 to 11. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would arise and worship, each at the entrance of his tent. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent.
Okay, so here's some more on Joshua. As I went over last week, when Moses went up to the mountain, he left Aaron and Heir in charge, as we covered last week. But Joshua actually continued up the mountain he couldn't go all the way up the mountain because only Moses was allowed there, but he went up halfway up the mountain and he waited there, faithfully waited for Moses for 40 days. Moses in the mountain for 40 days getting the 10 Commandments and all the law. Imagine you're in Joshua's position, you wait 40 days, when's this guy coming down? But unlike the Israelites, Joshua did not build any golden calves or didn't do anything other stupid things. He was just patiently waited. When Moses came down, and said there's like a cry in the camp, or there was, of course, being the general that Joshua is said, well, must be war. But that tells us, too, that Joshua didn't even know there was a golden calf. He had no part of it. Unlike Aaron, Joshua had no part of that. He did wait patiently for Moses to return for that whole 40 days. When the Bible describes Joshua, it uses words like assistant. It uses the word minister. It uses other words that are similar to that to describe his relationship with Moses. It was a pretty special relationship because he was the only one that waited on the mountain for him. And also Joshua wanted to hang out at the tabernacle where most of the nation of Israel waited their tents. Joshua waited at the tabernacle, which makes him real unique among all the leaders in Israel, even different than Caleb, who also was a great warrior and also was one of the good spies that we'll read about soon. But Joshua was definitely set apart in how he did ministry and what he did with Moses. Okay, number 3.
Numbers 13:31-33. But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us." So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." 14:6-10. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, "The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Then the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. Verse 30. "Surely you shall not come into the land in which I swore to settle you, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun."
Okay, so at this point, so Moses, when he wanted to spy the land out, he sent 12 spies. Why 12 spies? Because there were 12 tribes of Israel. And Israel, although there were one nation, they were actually like 12 tribes. Like we have 50 states now, they had 12 tribes. And they were quite tribal. They were quite loyal to their own tribe. In some ways more than they were the nation. So to be inclusive, Moses said, "I'll just send one from each tribe." There was none sent out from the tribe of Levi because they had no inheritance. God was their inheritance, and they were the ones that were going to manage the tabernacle and all the holy things of God to serve. So Joseph's 2 sons, Joseph was one of the 12 sons, but his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, they each got like a share. So that would bring the total to 12. So he lost Levi, but then Joseph got 2 shares. So to be inclusive, Moses sent 12 out. Didn't work out so well for them because 10 of the 12 tribes came back with a bad report. Actually, the thing they all had in common was all 12 of them said, "Yep, it's a land flowing of milk and honey," just like God promised. God said it's a land flowing of milk and honey, and it's a good land, and they were right because they'd been brought back like samples of fruits and samples of produce from the land, and it was quite impressive. Of course, the difference between the good spies and the bad spies was the bad ones said they're too strong, they're too big, they're too mighty, they're just too powerful, and we can't do it. Or the 2 good spies, they said, yeah, they are strong, they are mighty, but guess what? God's with us, and God took away their protection from them, so we can take these guys down, no problem. And those good spies were, of course, Joshua and Caleb were the good spies. Joshua from the half tribe of Ephraim, Caleb from the tribe of Judah. And because of the bad spies, given the bad report and causing Israel to have disbelief, the 10 spies, God had them killed pretty quickly. They didn't live long. The only 2 spies that were not killed, of course, were the good ones. And God not only didn't kill them, but even said that, hey, anybody that's 20 years old and younger, 20 years old and over, which were the counted adults, none of them will get to go to the promised land. You guys, they doubted. Because of your doubt, you're going to wander in the desert for 40 years until you're all dead. And except for Joshua and Caleb were the only 2 that were allowed to go into the promised land. So, interestingly, too, that they covered last week is like poor Aaron and Heir were in charge, and by Israel's history, they probably stoned Heir because there's no further mention of him, even though he was a leader. But now when the 12 spies come back, it's interesting that the Israel should have stoned the 10 bad spies. That's what they should have done. These guys gave a bad report and stoned these 10 bad guys to death. That would have pleased God, and that would have changed their history quite a bit. They didn't. Ironically, they wanted to stone the 2 good spies. It's like, this is interesting. But of course, God intervened, and that never happened. But it's interesting where their heart was to want to even consider doing that. Okay, and then number 4.
Numbers 27:13. When you have seen it, you too will be gathered to your people, as Aaron your brother was. And 15-23. Then Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, May the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, who will go out and come in before them, and who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of the Lord will not be like sheep which have no shepherd. So the Lord said to Moses, Take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him, and have him stand before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and commission him in their sight. You shall put some of your authority on him, in order that all the congregation of the sons of Israel may obey him. Moreover, he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him by the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. At this command they shall go out, and at his command they shall come in, both he and the sons of Israel with him, even all the congregation. Moses did just as the Lord commanded him, and he took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation. Then he laid his hands on him and commissioned him, just as the Lord had spoken through Moses.
Okay, so this point, Moses is getting ready to die because Moses struck the rock the second time. He was supposed to speak to the rock, and he struck the rock, and because of that, God said that, you can't go to the promised land. Of course, he actually did make it there when he was on the Mount of Transfiguration. He got to go there, but in his physical lifetime, he never got to go. But Moses was concerned, and knowing that God was going to have the next generation go to conquer the promised land, and he was concerned that they would have no leader that would lead them. And so, to answer Moses' prayer, God said, "Well, I got a leader for you. Appoint Joshua, the son of Nun, to be your next leader of your country, and he'll take you in, and he'll be like your general that will lead you." Lead your country or lead your nation to do that. Like in the New Testament, after Judas Iscariot hanged himself, there were supposed to be 12 apostles, and that left an empty office. So they had to pick a person to replace Judas Iscariot, and they had two people or two candidates that would qualify to be the next apostle, and they cast lots, and that lot fell to Matthias, became the 12th apostle, to take Judas Iscariot's place. Likewise, in this story, there's really two people that could have fulfilled that. The two good spies could have fulfilled the next leader of Israel. That would be Joshua and Caleb, of course, but the two candidates that could have been selected. But God chose Joshua, and the verses right before, why did God pick Joshua? Joshua had this special hunger for God that was unusual even among warriors. He was really unusual. He wanted to be in the tabernacle. He wanted to constantly hang out with Moses and constantly be with him. And then God chose Joshua, and says that God's Spirit was with Joshua. The high priest, on their chest, they wore a breastplate, and the breastplate held stones, and one stone for each tribe of Israel. They also held stones, and those two other stones were called the Urim and the Thummim. Urim is Hebrew, that means light. Thummim is Hebrew, that means perfection. And they would use these stones to try to discern God's will. We don't know how those stones work or what they did with them. You'll hear the term called casting lots. It's probably casting stones or to determine God's will. But you notice it references Urim here. And they determined that, of course, he was going to be the next leader. They wore the breastplate that held these stones. They wore it on what's called an ephod. An ephod is like an apron that the priest would wear. In this case, Aaron had died, and his son took over his place. Okay, that's number 4. And number 5.
Joshua 1:1-9. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, as far as the great sea toward the setting of the sun, will be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and only be strong and be very courageous, so that you may be successful where you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
Okay, so this is, at this point of the story, Moses had died, because at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses died, and God, I guess, recommissions Joshua and gives him a mission to go on and says, here's your mission, go conquer the promised land. When in the Bible, when anything's repeated a second time, it's like God wants to emphasize a certain point when it's said twice. In this 9 verses, God actually says three times to Joshua, and this is a command, it's not a suggestion. I suggest, I think you might want to be strong and courageous. It doesn't say that. It says, commands Joshua to be strong and courageous. And God tells him 3 different times to be strong and courageous. Why would God tell him that? Because that's probably exactly what he needed to do, and it probably was not natural to do that when you're coming up against these lands full of giants and walled cities. I'd imagine Israel at this point of their history, imagine if you're like 19 and younger, and you're wandering around the desert for 40 years, eating manna and eating quail and just wandering in circles for decades. I wonder what that generation was thinking. It's like, man, my grandparents were kind of stupid, and they didn't trust God to conquer this land, and now I have to wander for 40 years because of what they did. So by the time they got to finally conquer the promised land, they probably were, it's about time, I'm ready to go. Send me, please, I can't wait to go. And unlike the previous generation that wasn't too committed to following Moses, this generation of people was very committed to following not only Joshua, but following what God's commands to Joshua. Joshua was a unique leader in the sense that he was before he was a leader of Israel, he was actually a general. Just like David was a general too, before he became the king of Israel. We have some presidents of the U.S. that were prior generals before they became presidents. But this is God's choice for leader was Joshua. He's going to conquer you'll hear in those verses that he's supposed to conquer the land of the Hittites. The Canaan, or that area, was called the land of Canaan, or land of Canaanites. But yet, Noah's grandson or great-grandson, the Hittites, they actually moved to what's today central Turkey. So they were centered in central Turkey, but they actually went down and conquered Canaan, and they controlled Canaan. So that they were actually the power in the day of Joshua. The power of that area was actually Hittite power. Although most of the people were not Hittites, but they were like the rulers of the area. So when they said, go conquer the land of the Hittites, that's why God told them that. Okay, and then number 6.
Joshua 2, 8-13. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth below, or beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also will deal kindly with my father's household, and give me pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother, and my brothers and my sisters with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. 21-24. She said, according to your words, so be it. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and came to the hill country, and remained there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. Now the pursuers had sought them all along the road, but had not found them. Then the 2 men returned and came down from the hill country and crossed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and they related to him all that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "Surely the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before us."
Okay, so last time Moses sent out 12 spies, 2 were good and 10 were bad or even evil. This time Joshua, instead of being inclusive and sending out 12 spies like Moses did, he sends only 2 spies out. It seems like 2 is a good number to send out. When Jesus sent people out, he also sent them out. Even when he had 12 apostles, they didn't go in groups of 12. They went in groups of 2. And that's exactly what Joshua did here. He sent out 2 spies instead of 12. That those 2 spies, of course, came back with a good report, which is amazing in itself that they did that, as they should. But actually, the first good report didn't actually come from the 2 spies. It came from who? It came from Rahab. Rahab was the one that gave the good report. So of all the people, here's this Canaanite woman that's given the good report. Interesting about her, too, when she refers to God, said like God made everybody afraid of you guys. When she refers to God, the Hebrew word that she refers to God is Yahweh. Yahweh means Lord. It's also God's personal name. So the fact that she refers to God by his personal name and by Lord, it was very likely that she was actually saved even before these 2 spies came. She didn't get saved afterward. She was actually saved before. She knew who God was. So even though there was no preachers that went into Israel or into this Canaanite land, there were still Canaanites, at least including her, that were already, worshipped or served the God of the Jewish people even before they came in and conquered. So God has a way of spreading the gospel, even if just hearing our testimonies or our stories, which she did. Also in Hebrews 11:31. Hebrews 11 is what we call the Great Hall of Faith, or the faith chapter. And there are several people that are mentioned by name in Hebrews 11. Do you guys think Josh is mentioned by name? Anybody think he is? Actually, in Hebrews 11:31, Josh is the one that went and conquered Jericho. But Joshua is not mentioned by name in Hebrews 11. But Rahab is mentioned by name. Joshua is not, the good spies are not, Rahab is. So that means pretty special to be mentioned by name in there. Does anybody know who in the beautiful love story of Ruth, who is the leading man in the love story? Who became Ruth's husband in that beautiful story? Who was his name? Boaz. Of course, Boaz. Boaz's mom, guess who his mom was? Rahab's his mom. So that man in the love story of Ruth, Rahab's his mom, or his mother. Okay, and then part of the story is once they left, the 2 spies told Rahab and said, if you want your family to live, we're going to come and destroy this city. When we destroy it, if you want to live, be in this room. Everybody you want alive, be in this room and have a scarlet cord or a red cord hanging out the window. If you're in this room, when we come and destroy your city, you'll live. If you're outside the room, you're dead. So they had to be in this room by faith. And so with scarlet cord, there was one of the stories that a scarlet cord appeared. Do you remember what that is? Remember the lady Tamar? Tamar was Judah's daughter-in-law who got pregnant by Judah. It's an interesting story by itself. But when she was pregnant, she had twins in her womb, and one of those twins stuck his foot out of his mother, and they tied a scarlet cord around his leg, and then he pulled his leg back in, and his brother came out first. And they say his brother breached the gap because the one of the scarlet cord was supposed to be the firstborn, but he didn't come out first. The other son came out first. His name was Perez. Perez came out first and breached the gap. Perez, of course, was in the lineage of Christ, and the lineage of David and of Christ. So that's the story that the scarlet cord appears in. Interestingly, in Matthew, when it's going through the genealogy of Christ, there was 4 Gentile women that were mentioned in that story. The first one was Tamar, and the second one was Rahab, and there were 2 others. They were all mentioned in Jesus' ancestry. So the scarlet cord. Rahab knew that she even told the spies, wait 3 days, go hide somewhere, and wait 3 days, because they're going to look for you. Then if they don't find you, they're going to give up and think they couldn't get you. So you think, well, Rahab could have been thinking, I got time. They said put the scarlet cord out. It'll take at least 3 days before they're going to be hiding. It'll take even longer before they can go back and tell Joshua that we're going to conquer the city. So I could wait at least 3 days, or I can even wait a week to put the scarlet cord out. But according to scriptures, as soon as they left, scarlet cord's in the window right away. So she was smart in the regard that she didn't wait around for putting this out. She did it right away out of faith, which is a testimony to her faith, is just one more testimony to her faith, that she would deserve to be in the hall of faith. And by the way, according to Hebrew tradition, everything I've been telling you is all biblical. You can find this in various biblical references. What's not biblical, but Hebrew tradition states that one of those 2 spies was named, pronounce it right, Salmon, or Salmon, Salmon, and who also became Rahab's husband. So according to the tradition, one of those 2 spies that she hid later went back and married her. And of course, that would be the father of Boaz, who had his own love story of a foreigner, Ruth. Okay, number 7.
Joshua 3, 7-10. Now the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. You shall, moreover, command the priests who are carrying the ark of the covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. Then Joshua said to the sons of Israel, come here, and hear the words of the Lord your God. Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will assuredly dispossess from before you the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Hivite, the Perizzite, the Girgashite, the Amorite, and the Jebusite. 15-17. And when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the feet of the priests carrying the ark have dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks all the days of harvest, the waters which were flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap, a great distance away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those which were flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off. So the people crossed opposite Jericho. And the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground, until all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan.
Okay, so this part of the story, there was in Moses' time, the Jordan River separates the west of the Jordan River would be where Jericho is and the land of Canaan is. East of the Jordan River was where the sons of Lot were, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Israel conquered them when Moses was still alive. They conquered the places east of the Jordan, and two and a half tribes actually settled in east of the Jordan. But when they crossed the Jordan to go fight the land of the Canaanites, they had to cross the Jordan River to do it. And they did it during a time of flooding. But like when Moses was alive and they crossed the Red Sea to escape Egypt, this case, Joshua kind of pulls the same miracle that Moses did. How are you going to cross this body of water? And they were going to cross it on dry land, and they did that. But they did that because the high priest with the Ark of the Covenant, also called the Ark of Testimony, stepped into the water, and the land dried up. So the first people in, the last people out were the priests that carried the ark. And God did this miracle to Israel, to the new generation that maybe didn't see the miracles of the other, that they crossed the Red Sea, but they got to see God repeating this miracle. Also, God used this to show Israel that, hey, Joshua's my guy. He's my leader. You better obey him and do what he says, and he's my leader. So they crossed on dry land. When they were across from the biggest city in Canaan, it's interesting that God would send, of all the cities that they were going to conquer, they actually conquered 10 cities by name in the promised land. Jericho was the first of the 10 cities. And they were going to conquer this city. And this city was famous for a lot of reasons. Today, by the way, it's the oldest inhabited city in the world to this day. They actually wouldn't rebuild it. Also, according to history, is Jericho was the first city in the world that had walls. If you ever knew that or not. It was considered the first walled city of the world. And they kept building these walls. Every generation would build these walls bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, it was probably so big that they could even ride a chariot on the walls. That's how big it was. And the Israel had no equipment for they had no battering rams, they had no catapults, they had nothing to take a city with even a small wall, not alone a big wall. Interesting comparison too with the Tower of Babel was this big tower that went straight up, and God wasn't happy with their pride, and they had this big tower that they were going to reach to the heavens. But they must have had quite a bit of pride in these big walls that, hey, no one can conquer me. I got these big walls and I'm unconquerable. But yet God picked that one to be the first one that God would destroy, or God would have them destroy. On his way to Jericho, after they crossed the Jordan River and before they went into Jericho, Joshua saw this guy carrying a big sword and saw this, who is this guy? And Joshua asked a question, which I know the worship team would mention. Tina, you mentioned it. Is, whose side are you on? Are you on my side or their side? Which side are you on? And of course, the answer was, I'm on neither one of your sides. Question is, are you on my side? That's the question. And he said, take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. And of course, we know going back to Moses, when he saw the burning bush, that Moses took off his shoes when he heard God speaking to the burning bush. And they refer to this as being the angel of the Lord was the one that was speaking to Joshua. A lot of theologians believe that would be called a Christophany. That's just a fancy word to a pre-incarnate Christ, or that Christ appeared in bodily form before he was born of Mary, that he appeared back in the Old Testament a few times. This being one of those possible times. So, are you on my side? Are you on their side? Wrong question. Are you on my side? That's God's asking him and asked. And he did take his shoes off and worshiped. And that's in Joshua 5 that happened. And then let's go to Joshua 6. 6 is number 8.
Joshua 6:15-21. Then on the 7th day they rose early at the dawning of the day, and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. At the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpet, Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban. It and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them, and take some of the things under the ban, and make the camp of Israel accursed, and bring trouble on it. But all the silver and gold, and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted, and priests blew the trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. They utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. 25-27. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared, and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Then Joshua made them take an oath at that time, saying, cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and builds this city Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land.
Okay, so this is as I said, it's the first city of 10 cities that they conquered. God also had a special rule for the city that all the silver, gold in the city is going to go to God. It was not going to be for the people to do what they want to do with. It's going to be to go to God. And of course, there were 10 cities, so this would be called the tithe. Tithe is actually Hebrew for guess what? It means tenth. That's all it means is tenth, or 10% or tenth, 1/10. So this was like a form of a tithe where by the way, the nine cities they conquered after Jericho, everything in their city that they would capture, they got to keep it. This was the only city that God said, what's in the city is mine. Don't touch any of it. Don't take any of it. It belongs to me. And so it's got like a form of tithe. Interesting battle plan. I guess Josh didn't go to the general school or something, because marching around a city a bunch of times wouldn't be a normal plan for conquering a city. But God's ways are quite different than our ways, aren't they? March around a city once a day for 6 days. The seventh day you march around it 7 times, which would be probably kind of tiring, but that's what they did. Then they shout at the city, and then God causes an earthquake or something, and the city falls down. And some archaeologists will say that most of the time when you conquer a city, the city kind of caves in on itself. They actually found the city that caved outward instead of inward, because it wasn't conquered in a normal way. It was conquered by people shouting at it. Joshua also put a curse on the city and said that, beware that if the city is ever rebuilt, then it's going to cost the life of their firstborn and their lastborn son. So beware, don't let it be rebuilt. But actually it was rebuilt later, and much later. Do you even know when it was rebuilt? If you refer to 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 34, that's the reference of when it was rebuilt. There was a guy named Heir of the city of Bethel that decided to rebuild the city. And he rebuilt the city. He was from Bethel. Bethel was one of the 2 cities when after Israel split in half and the northern kingdom broke away from David's lineage, and Jeroboam, the leader of the northern kingdom, set up golden calves to worship. Kind of goes back to a golden calf, right? And he's put them up in 2 cities. One was Bethel and one was Dan. Bethel was a special city because that's where God spoke to Abraham, and later he spoke to Jacob in the city of Bethel. But this guy was from Bethel, named Heir, and he rebuilt Jericho. And when he set up his walls or its gates, his oldest son died, and when he finished the project, his youngest son died, just as Joshua said. So, not a good sign. They don't know what caused the death of these 2 sons of his, but one thing of interest at that time was God hated the idols that they worship, because some of the idols that they worship, they would involve human sacrifices, and God hated human sacrifice. But they had a type of human sacrifice at that time in history that was called a foundation sacrifice. And they think historically that might have, when his 2 sons got killed, that might have been part of what's called a foundation sacrifice, to kill his own sons and to bury them into the foundation. That was especially prevalent in a wicked king of Israel named Ahab. Ahab was a known Baal worshiper, and Baal was huge into human sacrifices, and this was especially prominent during Ahab's time. Well, guess who was king when Hillel rebuilt Jericho? Ahab was the king at that time, controlling this area. So, interesting how that lines up. So, okay, so the Battle of Jericho was conquered, and we saw what happened with it when it was rebuilt. Okay, number 9.
Joshua 7, 6-13. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, why did you ever bring this people over the Jordan, only to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us? If only we had been willing to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say, since Israel has turned their back before their enemies? For the Canaanites and the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and they will surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what will you do for your great name? So the Lord said to Joshua, Rise up. Why is it that you have fallen on your face? Israel has sinned, and they also have transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. And they have even taken some of the things under the ban, and have both stolen and deceived. Moreover, they have also put them among their own things. Therefore the sons of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies, for they have become accursed. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy the things under the ban from your midst. Rise up, consecrate the people, and say, Consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, for thus the Lord, the God of Israel, has said, There are things under the ban in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you have removed the things under the ban from your midst.
Okay, so they conquered this big city of Jericho that was like unconquerable with no equipment to do it with, but God allowed Joshua and his army to conquer this big, powerful city of Jericho by a miracle that, like causing an earthquake or something, to make these walls fall down so they can go and destroy them. The second city of 10 cities they were to conquer was this little city named Ai. It's like maybe 3,000 people. A really tiny city, no walls. Or actually had walls, but it wasn't, not like Jericho. And yet they go fight this, after defeating this really large city, it's like this would be a piece of cake in their mind. But yet they went and they lost. It's like, how can you lose to this? Like you go defeat this huge giant city, then you go lose to a tiny one. It's like, how can that happen? And of course the reason it happened because God told Israel and saying all the gold, the silver in this first city is like a tithe, that's mine. Do not dare touch it. But yet there was one man that decided he knew better than God. He's going to ignore God and decide, well, I can take this because a little bit of gold won't hurt, right? Just breaking God's law a little bit won't matter. And besides, no one's going to know anyway. I can hide under my tent and no one's going to know. And God won't know because, of course, that's what he thought. Thought quite wrong, didn't he? Sadly, when Israel went to fight Ai, that they should have easily won, they lost and they were humiliated and embarrassed. Some of the people got killed too. So I guess one lesson from this is don't touch what's God's. God says this is mine. Don't be dumb enough to think you know better than God, then I'll keep it for myself. Better to have 90% blessed than have 100% cursed, right? So Joshua, this was Joshua's, in his history of being a general, this is the only time that he suffered defeat. He was undefeated except for this. There are in history a few generals or admirals that are undefeated in history. There aren't very many of them, but there are a few that never lost a battle. Sadly, Joshua was not one of them because of this one incident. Because of one guy sinning against God, Joshua can't make the claim to fame, I'm an undefeated general. There are generals and admirals throughout history that were undefeated. None of our prior presidents were undefeated in battle, but one that's example in the Bible that was prophesied was that Alexander the Great was undefeated, which is prophesied in the book of Daniel. That Joshua did not get to be one of them, unfortunately. But it cost the guy his life for doing that. He got stoned, and they actually buried him and all his stuff with stones because he hid this gold and silver under his tent. Okay, and then number 10.
Joshua 24:15-20. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The people answered and said, Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God is he who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. and who did these great signs in our sight and preserved us through all the way in which we went and among the people through whose midst we passed. The Lord drove out from before us all the peoples, even the Amorites who lived in the land. We also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. Then Joshua said to the people, You will not be able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after he has done good to you. 28 to 31. Then Joshua dismissed the people, each to his inheritance. It came about after these things that Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance, in Timnath-Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, on the north of Mount Gash. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, and had known all the deeds of the Lord which he had done for Israel.
Okay, it's very important as leaders, and all of us can be leaders, it's very important to train and get the next generation ready to serve and take our places. The Joshua generation did quite well. They conquered God allowed them to conquer most of the promised land. There were still areas that were not conquered in his time. But God allowed them to do quite a great things. They seemed to have a fear of God, which is a good thing, and they seemed to follow God, and they knew God's works and his miracles. Unfortunately, though, the generation that, if you go to the book of Judges and Judges 1, as well as the end of Joshua, there arose a generation after Joshua and elders that were during his time that didn't know God. So as great as their generation was, they did make a few mistakes. One of the mistakes was they didn't share their works. All these great works that they did, they didn't pass it down to the next generation. They were unaware of the great works that God did in their lives. So it's really important as Christians that we pass to our kids and grandkids and just people after us, say, here's all the great things that God did. Also, the Joshua generation, even though they didn't serve the idols, but they kept them. They had them. So the next generation that came up, they got in the trap of worshiping idols that their parents didn't dispose of, they should have gotten rid of. So it's very important to train and commission the next generation of leaders to serve the Lord. And I won't read them, but I'm just going to mention last week what I didn't get to cover. One point I didn't get to cover, just reference the verses instead of stating them. Also, like one correction from last week when I spoke, that there were actually two people, well, besides Jesus, there were two other people in history, biblical history, that said, take my name out of the book of life that my people can be saved. One of them was, of course, Moses said that to God. And actually the other one I forgot to mention was in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul made the same statement. I forgot about the Apostle Paul. I was focused on the Old Testament anyway. I was going to refer last week to Hebrews 7. I didn't get to conclude this, but in Hebrews 7, I talked about Aaron, the great high priest that God had a new high priest, which was Jesus Christ, would be the permanent high priest, and Hebrews 7 goes into a lot of information about that. That was also prophesied in Psalm 110, that God would make a priesthood in the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek was the high priest that Abraham tithed to, and Melchizedek is considered by many theologians to be also a Christophany, which is another example of Christ possibly appearing even in the Old Testament, along with the angel of the Lord. Just wanted to bring that up. So the references were Hebrews 7, Psalm 110, and also Acts chapter 2. Those are three references that will take you to talking about Jesus' high priesthood from last week. But this week it was about Joshua, so lots and lots of lessons to learn from him about being strong and courageous, about being a good leader, and hopefully about training the next generation to serve the Lord, and about conquering and hearing God, and many other good things we can learn from Joshua. So that concludes this message, and also concludes my series on the people close to Moses. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.
You know me, he's a straight teacher, and I'm an exhorter. An exhorter is practical. So was there anything that Matthew taught on that you can put it into your life or into life in general that's practical for you, that you learned in these teaching? There's a lot of stuff. Okay, I'll start throwing some stuff out. King Saul didn't obey God, didn't kill the Amalekites. Look at all the harm it caused the Jews. And sometimes we never know. We can be messing up generations to come because we're not doing what we should be doing now. The other side is a person, King David. He was a great godly man, and he set up generations, or Abraham's another one. So we can set up generations of blessings as well. So we can look at those things that we always look into today's life. Well, of course, we can say, well, Jesus is coming back soon. Well, we've been saying that for a long time. I still believe he is, but soon could be a long time for God. But we have to make sure, too, because we can affect future generations. Look at the forefathers in America when they came to Plymouth Rock, and they prayed over this nation, and they asked God to bless this nation, and they dedicated it to God. Look how we've been blessed as a nation since then. And it doesn't mean it'll go on forever, just like the Jews ended up messing things up so bad that they're going to be blessed again. But we just need to remember that it can affect generations in the future. Anybody else?